Tilea's Troubles, Part 137. A Strange Vessel, near Palomtrina, northeast of Remas. After 3 hours of blessing the dead, praying with the wounded, and praising the soldiers for their brave service, and all this immediately after commanding his army in battle against a veritable horde, His Holiness Bernardo Ugolini was beginning to flag. When a messenger begged for an audience, he was too tired to know if he was grateful for the distraction or frustrated at yet another matter requiring his attention. Bernardo could not recall the messenger's name, but knew the young cleric had been assigned to the maestro's staff, due to his particular interest in natural philosophy. "Well met, good father," said Bernardo. "You have something to tell me?" "Yes, your holiness. His honour, Dalione, asks that you attend him, concerning a matter of considerable importance." Since the battle ended, as far as Bernardo knew, the maestro had been inspecting the enemy's doom bombard, the terror weapon they had hauled from their underpasses to threaten the lives of every Reman citizen. Before he could speak, the high priest of the Macopian church, Flavio Tognazzi, asked the messenger, "The maestro, I take it, he is still with the engine?" "Yes, father," said the messenger. "Then," continued Tognazzi, a hint of derision evident in his voice, "considering the engine's terrible potential and the mortal danger of merely approaching it, I suggest the maestro should bring himself hither, rather than presuming to risk his holiness's health, indeed his life." Bernardo was aware of the fear the entire army felt concerning the bombard's proximity. Its smaller predecessor had reportedly killed almost everyone within several thousand braccia. Yet, of course, the maestro would know this too. Indeed, what with his mathematical, architectural and mechanical genius, he would surely understand the consequences on a level others could never comprehend. "Good father," inquired Bernardo, "did Angelo ask that I attend him directly, at the engine?" "He did, your honour." "Then it seems to me that he must believe it is safe to do so." Tognazzi looked uncomfortable. "Such a man as the maestro might think it reasonable to take risks with his own life, and undoubtedly does so regularly within his own studio, what with his experiments and procedures. But he asks too much if he thinks his holiness should place himself at risk." Bernardo turned to Tognazzi. "Do not worry yourself, Father Flavio. Angelo is the one person I trust most when it comes to such matters. He, more than any other, is best equipped to ascertain the true nature and extent of such potential dangers." As he approached the engine, which stood exactly where it had ground to a halt when Father Uguccione and the Bravi attacked it, he sensed immediately that the maestro and his companions seemed somewhat excitable. They stood close to the engine, some even clambering around it. Bernardo had half expected to see buckets of water gathered close by, all the better to extinguish a sudden fire, soothe burns, or even just cool some part of the engine that was beginning to boil. He had very much expected some sort of scaffolding erected around it to allow safe inspection of all its parts, or perhaps guy ropes pegging it firmly in place to ensure it could not topple. Yet there was nothing. The reports concerning the engine's predecessor had described how it poisoned the ground over which it passed to a depth of several feet, killing both beast and flower, grass and insect, even the trees it trundled past upon its journey. Here the grass was unscathed, apart from where the weight of the great wheel propelling the engine had churned the ground, which was no more than what the maestro's steam tank had done, and only little more damage than that which might result from the passage of a company of mounted men-at-arms. "Your Holiness," hailed the maestro, perhaps having sensed the trepidation in the approaching party, "fear not, and approach. I can assure you it is safe to do so." The maestro's apprentices and journeymen stopped whatever it was they were doing, to stand in respectable silence as the arch-lector drew near. "I would not advise you to touch the sky-stones, of course," continued Dalione, pointing to the strange green, slightly glowing orbs mounted on projecting steel arms from the wheel, while, somewhat strangely, not indicating the much larger chunk of warpstone directly behind him on the bombard. "Nor should you run your finger along the rusted edges of the metalwork, but otherwise there's nothing here that can harm you." Bernardo found this perplexing, and wondered whether the engine had yet to be loaded with its deadly grenados, a thought that quickly turned into a new concern. "So it is not loaded?" he asked, eliciting a nod from Dalione. "Then where are the grenados?" "Ah, now, there's a thing. None have been found, your holiness." Bernardo suspected the maestro was presenting clues to a riddle, one which he himself had already solved. It was an attitude which seemed entirely inappropriate, considering the power contained in said grenados. Were they close enough, perhaps even within a mile or two, then their detonation could bring death upon the entire army. "I suppose," said Dalione, "the absence of grenados would explain why the engine was driven the way it was. Carelessly, recklessly, directly towards, indeed plunging straight into our men." Bernardo had himself been surprised by the engine's behaviour in the battle, as if it were little more than a steam-powered battering ram. He had supposed it was due to the crazed carelessness of the uomo ratto controlling it, perhaps arising from desperation. "Then there must be a baggage train somewhere, carrying the grenados," suggested Bernardo. "One might suppose so, your holiness," agreed Dalione. "Yet, were that the case, then the engine itself would surely be with said train. Why place it here, deployed with the army, as if it were a combatant?" Bernardo now knew for certain that the maestro was toying with him. He had long been aware that Dalione was eccentric, often outspoken, and prone to carelessness when it came to proper social hierarchies, but to play such games over a matter as serious as this might be considered unforgivably impertinent. "Good maestro, it is plain to me that you know the answer to these questions. What I fail to understand is why you have made it a guessing game." "I, too, found myself faced with a mystery recently," answered the maestro, "concerning why I was not part of the discussions, considering the uomini-ratto threat. Every indication had previously been given that my advice would be crucial, that I should be ready to advise in any way I could and at any moment. And yet all was arranged without me, plans laid, preparations made. I was only called upon as the army marched forth, as if I was nothing more than an afterthought, and barely had time to arrange for the brutes and strong men. Or was it that I am no longer trusted, your holiness?" Bernardo realised he should have known that the maestro would suspect something. The uomini-ratto had demanded Dalione be surrendered to them, as part payment to spare the city from the terror weapon. Believing that such knowledge would distract the maestro, clouding his thoughts and so diminishing his genius, he had thus ordered the demands be kept secret from him. Not only might the maestro fear what the rat-men would do should they lay their hands upon him, but he might also have become afraid of his fellow Remans, thinking that they might choose to sacrifice him for the city's sake. "I can assure you, you are trusted, Angelo," said Bernardo. "More than this, respected and loved. What you perceive as secrecy was for your own good. It is a riddle I am entirely happy to explain, for the danger, it seems, has passed. But first, indulge an old priest, will you, and yield an answer to this nightmarish riddle." Dalione had scrutinised Bernardo as he spoke, as if measuring the honesty of his words, his expression, his stance. "Good to hear," he said, "and of course I am only too happy to put your holiness, and indeed the whole of Rimas, out of their misery." He strode over to the barrels, mounted perpendicularly on the carriage pushed before the wheel, and clunked his brass linstock against the iron. "This isn't real. It is an illusion, a trick, nothing more than stage scenery. These barrels are unfit to fire anything more than a flash of smoke. They are too thin, quite brittle, the casting riddled with flaws. The whole thing is strong enough to hold itself together while being moved, but it could never be expected to launch a grenado. That massive piece of skystone behind the barrels is almost entirely impotent, perhaps having long since been drained of its power. The engine pushing it is real enough. The weapon itself, however, is but the image of a bombard." It looked convincing to Bernardo. Yet, if what the maestro claimed was true, then it would be the final piece of the puzzle. "The uomini-ratto conjured a terrifying illusion for us," continued the maestro, "in the hope that we would yield unto whatever demands they made, or cause us to flee, or divide our forces, or merely make us fearful as we fought." "We know they used such a weapon before, and to great effect," said Bernardo. "I have no doubt, your holiness, that the bombard they employed at Campagrotta was a very real and truly terrible weapon of war, but its true purpose may merely have been to sow fear throughout Tilea. Indeed, it did not even need to launch its grenado successfully. for its own failure and subsequent explosion was sufficient to advertise its potency, to prove it was capable of fatally poisoning a vast swathe of land. Once that was achieved, then all they had to do was make a suitably convincing counterfeit, at little cost and presenting no danger to the army accompanying it. Such an imitation would be all they needed to make their threats. Part relief, part understanding, suffused Bernardo. He began to laugh, allowing the kind of giddiness he had not felt since childhood to overcome him. And as soon as he did, the maestro joined in. Then the others, too. "I mean," said Tilean, in between the laughing, "look at it! It's ridiculous! As if such a thing could ever hope to work. 2 giant barrels on 1 carriage? It's as improbable as a sword made of painted clay." "A tankard made of cheese," shouted one of the maestro's men. "A ship made of wool," cried another.